Hello.
Hey, what's up?
How's it going?
It's going okay. I can't believe today's the 30th. I mean, I can't believe it, and at the same time, I'm like, I cannot. It's like it's been 20 decades just in 1 year, but it's also been so fast. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, it's funny. I signed up for emails from okay, it's the WHO, but I like to call them the WHO. And yeah, they're like 1 year COVID. I'm like, oh my gosh, I've been getting these emails for almost like a year now. How are you? Did you celebrate Christmas or
yeah, we kind of did some socially distant stuff, wearing like masks with a few of my family members, but um that was about it. What about you?
just went there with one friend because we both like live by ourselves, so we don't have like another bubble, and so that's kind of been it. And my cat, but that's good. Did your kiddo have fun?
Yeah, she had fun. She got some cool stuff from Santa. She got this little like Chromebook laptop she
Oh,
wanted that she's been using quite a bit, so she was pretty um stoked about that. So, but yeah, like this break from schools went by very quick because class starts again next week, right?
yeah, I think so. That's actually
Okay.
horrible. I'm like, why did we get such a little break? Um, but yeah, I think it starts next week, which means like less George Jackson readings and more of like neoliberal,
Textbooks, yeah.
neoliberal sort of like here's how to run your government like a nonprofit. It's like
Hmm.
okay.
Yeah.
But yeah, I can't believe it's like what is it like the third or the fourth that we could go back either one of those days. Um, it's just yeah, I don't know why they're going back so soon, but I guess whatever. I don't know. Um, but especially for me, because I don't work, so usually like school breaks do feel like a true break to me. But then I'm
Hmm.
like, oh, I don't know how that would feel. But I bet like if you work plus like school, it probably also feels like a real break and not to be doing school on top of everything else.
Yeah, no, I haven't worked for a while either. Luckily, I've been able to collect unemployment, which has been kind of nice. And I feel like, yeah, we should just have like UBI right now for like everybody to stay home.
Yeah.
And yeah, I guess maybe we can start talking about what's going on with like the Senate and McConnell because the House passed that $2,000 stimulus check bill thing, but McConnell's more or less holding it up and wanting to attach a bunch of garbage stuff to it so it doesn't even get to the floor for a vote. And I just read an article that what he's trying to put in the bill would make it so it couldn't even be voted on because revenue stuff has to like originate in the House, and what he's trying to put into it would make it so it couldn't pass at all. So it just seems like he's trying to sabotage it at all costs. What are your kind of thoughts about it?
So I think, well, one, now it feels like they muddied the process even more. So now I feel like it's even more confusing, which really kind of works for them because now, like, I think people are both like desperate and confused and stuff like that. Because I don't know, like, yeah, because there's the House one, and then there's the one McConnell's trying to push, and but there's also the fact that people are getting the $600 right
Yeah.
now, and then but I think yeah, one is way more confusing. I think it's awful. I think that I don't know if he gets just like this sheer joy out of torturing poor people, but
Yeah.
yeah, like all the other stuff too. Like he's trying to attach like Section 230 to it, which like it's been like talked a lot about. I'm still trying to learn more about it, but like doing it right now and doing it like that would be really really bad. And then I think I also read because the house was originally like 2000 per person and then 2000 per dependent, and
Okay.
the McConnell one is 500 per dependent, or like
Uh,
so his differs as well than the house, even as not only like so yeah, the house was like $2,000 per person, and then there was dependent, and there was like adult dependent, and then I think the McConnell bill doesn't have that. So I think that is really truly shitty.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think either he's like willing for it to just like die right when it gets there, and so, and I don't know, I guess there's this weird dynamic between Trump and McConnell, but at the same time, they might just be working together. I don't know, maybe this is my conspiracy theory, but it just seems like more likely they would be working together to sort of like pull this off, but I don't know. How do you feel about it? Because yeah, I'm still trying to gather a lot of what has happened in the last like 24 hours.
Yeah, I mean, not super surprised, frankly, that McConnell is doing what he's doing. He's horrible, always been an enemy of the working class. And yeah, it's like we have two far right wing parties in the United States. We don't really have a political party that's actually fighting for the best interest of the working class. And um, I mean it, and also it seems like if he wants to keep control of the Senate, he would actually be trying to push this because it's like, oh, like I supported this, the two Republican senators in Georgia support it. You don't need a vote for their Democratic opponents, even though they support it. So it's like, is he just trying to make it so bad that when Biden comes in, it's just going to be, even worse and harder for him to get any of the shitty centrist stuff done that, Biden wants to do? Because I mean, it's very popular. Like I saw one poll said that 78% of, people in the US support it. So it's hugely popular. There's so many people that are struggling right now, but it's like, he's just such a ghoul, and like you said, just hates poor people so much. He just doesn't care. And but yeah, it'll be interesting if the two Democrats do win in those runoff elections in Georgia. Democrats would control the Senate at that point, so they could theoretically try to push it at a later date if there's still that kind of political will to do it, which I hope there would be. So I guess, electoral politics isn't everything, but it would be good if those Democratic senators win in Georgia, because they've both had said that they would, support the $2,000 survival checks, or stimulus checks, whatever you want to call it. So, I mean, yeah, I doubt McConnell's probably going to bring it to the floor for like a clean vote without trying to attach all that other kind of bullshit to it.
Yeah, I think, I mean, that's another thing that I wonder about because it is very cynical and like it all appears like chess moves. But yeah, I wonder how much is he like, thinking of like, oh, I'm going to like, um, that he's going to like lose his power. And I think McConnell desperately, the only thing he cares about is this like a little bit of power. I guess it's a
Yeah.
lot of power that he
Yeah.
has. But and I just remember, I guess like the other week I don't know, I just love hating him much like every week. But I remember watching this documentary or something like that of like one of the reasons why, apart from being like an evil man, is that another reason that McConnell was so ready to pack the court is that some people suspect that he's still angry from like the 1980s because the Democrats were like um, didn't want to um, accept his nominee that Reagan like did, like Robert Bork. Or like I had to look more into that because like I've never really heard about that, and ever since. But also I'm trying to like I don't mean like I don't want to dig deep into McConnell's life, but I'm just want to be like, what happened here? Because I also watched a
Yeah.
Nixon documentary, and I think either the same person who helped Nixon win or like coach him to sort of like in politics also coach McConnell. So I'm
Mhm.
like, it kind of makes sense, but at the same time, like I don't know, like I don't know how they're polling in Georgia, but you're right. Like at the same time, it feels, and then yeah, like Joe Biden's centrist approaches. Like where is Joe Biden in any of all of this? Like, have you heard him talk about it? Have you heard him say anything? No, he hasn't even like made any sort of comment. Like we see Bernie Sanders like talk about him being like, I'm gonna filibuster this and I'm gonna do this, and and then Biden is just like crickets somewhere.
Down in his basement in Delaware. Yeah, they got him in cryogenic freeze or something. I don't know, but yeah, I mean, I did see like he did come out like the other day. I think he said he supported it, but I mean, it's pretty pathetic when
Yeah.
Trump is to the left of him on
Yeah.
this issue when Biden is of the Democratic Party, which in theory is supposed to be more for the working people, which obviously it hasn't been for quite some time. And also like crickets from Kamala Harris when she was the co-sponsor of the $2,000 kind of stimulus checks plan that her and Bernie Sanders and some other senators have come up with. But it's like she got silent on that as soon as she was picked to be Biden's VP. And like I also find it very interesting because like her politics are so different like from her father. Her father is some type of like Marxist or Marxist scholar or professor or something like that, and then you have like Kamala Harris being this neoliberal centrist. And same with Pete Buttigieg. Pete Buttigieg's father was also like a communist or a Marxist, and then you have Pete Buttigieg wanting to, means test all these things. I
Yeah.
just find that really interesting. If you have a parent that has, pretty leftist or radical politics, and then how does your child end up being trash like, Pete Buttigieg's politics or Kamala Harris's?
Yeah, that's also so true that, that you bring up that her dad, it was like a, pretty radical Marxist, considering too, if we look at Kamala Harris, like, um, thing as about like an attorney general, whatever the fuck she was doing in San Francisco, like, how much she banned to get people in prison in this horrible system. So I also wonder too, why that, and like how does it happen? And that's another thing too, like, I don't know, because as an immigrant, I do get excited about this thing, though I think the entire Biden playing identity politics leaves such a horrible taste about it in my mouth. But being like, oh, I'm the child of an immigrant, and then there's like, right, but like I'm an immigrant, and there's all these other people that are immigrants, and I wonder if there's this like certain thing, if like the American upbringing makes it a little bit different. I don't know. And yeah, I don't know. Like, I feel like if I had a child and my child turned out to be centrist, I'd be like, what happened? Like, what happened here?
What did I do wrong?
I'm like, what happened here? I'm like, oh my god.
Yeah.
Um, that's I don't know. Did you grow up with a particularly like leftist upbringing?
I mean, not really. I mean, I don't know. I feel like for the most, well, at least not until I feel like I was an adult. Like I didn't really like think or engage any type of like political thought. Like my dad's side of the family was definitely pretty conservative and like still are. Like my grandma is definitely like a Trump supporter, and my dad was at one point, but he said in like 2016, if it had been like Bernie or Trump, like he would have voted for Bernie, but it was Clinton
Hillary.
and Trump, so he voted for Trump. And I'm not sure who he voted for this time, but yeah, my feel like my kind of politics didn't really start to develop until kind of got to college at Western, and then um yeah, like I voted for Obama in 2008, then became pretty disillusioned not too long during his like first term, and that kind of started to push me more left, more socialist, more communist, and I've continued to kind of go that trajectory since then. What about you?
It's actually really um no, I that's really interesting because my parents also voted Trump. They probably also voted Trump this time. Um, but I was reading this article one about like what's like, when did you become radicalized? And I'm sure like there were different parts, but I think ever since I was a child, before I could name it, and I think most people probably had the same feeling of like, well, everyone should have a house. Like I had this entire utopia, like socialist utopia when I was like a kid. I was just like, so this is I got my plan how everyone's gonna like at first like everyone's gonna have a house and people are just gonna barter for different things. So but growing up, my mom didn't really call it leftist, but she introduced me to a lot of different like ideas such as like human rights and ideas such as like imperialism. And it's kind of funny though because both of us moving here kind of accelerates in different directions. I think the whole disappointment with Obama definitely made her go right. She's like a Trump
Mm,
supporter, but we'll have like the same similar positions. My mom also kind of has like a distaste for the word Marxist or anything like that, just
okay.
because of her relationship with the Civil War. Even though the U.S. backed right wing government of El Salvador committed most atrocities, a lot of involvement with the guerrilla, I think, kind of that. And my family was like, I think they were always conservative, at least on this sort of thing, and at least like
Mhm.
fiscally conservative, I think too, because my mom. So we used to make this thing where, like in El Salvador, there's more class discrimination than race discrimination. That's not true. There's both,
Okay.
but I think for me and my mom, it was glaringly obvious because out of all her siblings, my mom was like the only one that was a single mom, and that definitely affected us. So, kind of did and kind of not. Like when I moved to the United States, I live in Huntington Beach, California, which is really conservative.
Hmm.
Orange County is like really one of the most conservative places in
Yeah.
California and in all of in Los Angeles. I think a lot about what's going on there now, and that like a week ago there were like a bunch of people in Hampton Beach being like, yeah, yeah, we're gonna protest, we're gonna have no mask on. So I don't know. I think too. But as I got older and I went to college, I think I became more and more like I guess radicalized, or also being able to like place my opinions on certain
Hmm.
things. But yeah, I just if my child was a centrist, I'd be like, why? Why?
Disown them.
Yeah, I'd be like, no. I'm like, oh my god, this is almost as bad, but not quite as bad as being a white supremacist. But just get out of my face. Either way, you're upholding white supremacy. Get out of my face.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's yeah, interesting. Like my mom's politics are definitely a lot more like in line with mine than like my dad's are. And it's interesting, like you can have there's some like family members or just people or friends that maybe have different political viewpoints. You could still have like a civil conversation with them about politics and world events and stuff like that. But then other people, but whether it be friends or family members, it's like more of like just like butting heads and very hard to actually discuss these things because people are so like attached to certain worldviews and stuff.
Yeah, and I think too there's this sort of like thing in which we attach certain things to like right or left, but especially here like right wing or left wing when like you said most Americans support $2,000 and stuff like that. Um, a lot of Democrats try to be like, no, we're the fighting class. I'm like, but are you really if you're still passing this stuff? And this
Mhm.
is why so many people will vote Trump, but also be like, yeah, I would like a $15 minimum wage, or like, yeah, I would like $2,000. So it's they try to mix up all of these politics together to again just kind of force this like either have to be with us or them. Our best platform is we're not Republicans, and that is like that's the best you got. I'm like it's
Yeah.
going into like I'm not a serial killer. We should date. I've only killed 2 people. That guy has killed 3 people.
So I'm slightly better. So yeah, let's go hang out. Oh, man.
Uh, no.
Um, yeah, one of the quotes I wrote down from that book, Blood in My Eye by George Jackson, he talks about before a revolution can take place, all the forms of redress must be exhausted. Do you think we're at that point or getting to that point, or like what
Uh,
else
I
needs to happen to get to that point where there's like this revolutionary consciousness and people are willing and ready to take this like radical action to kind of dismantle all these oppressive systems and build back something that actually takes care, of people's needs.
Yeah, so I'm kind of wondering, uh, so like, what does he mean by redress? This is actually really interesting because, so I'm looking it up and like, because there's compensation, reparation, restitution, and I wonder if redress is like different than reform. But to answer your question, I think like, yeah, I mean, like, I think for over like 100 years, our now has been exhausted. I think that, every avenue has been exhausted. I think at this point, we've seen that even things as we try to readdress will be stopped by the establishment. I mean, as we talked about, like electoral elections and fraud, or Trump or McConnell, which also is another thing he wants to put in the bill, is like a committee of like to look at the election.
Yeah.
Okay, that's not gonna put us all over the budget. This false austerity, but they want to spend money on that. That's cool. But anyway, like, with Bernie and the entire kind of conspiracy to make sure he wouldn't get the nomination, even as we try to reform or redress through that way, it will be stopped. So I think yeah, I think we've kind of exhausted every avenue. I guess like before revolution, maybe a form of redress or stuff like that would be like a general strike, but I don't know. I think for me, I felt for a long time that like it has been tried everything, or if it is tried, um, we cannot we have not, like, it has been stopped. And I wonder too if like maybe there's this idea going up from Jackson said, I wonder if before we can have redress, if we must have revolution first and then redress. Um, because at least with reforms, like you could have a reform put in and then like the next cycle, for whatever reason, it can be taken back.
Yep.
So what is a reform if it can be easily replaced in the next 4 years?
Yeah, I'll just read the paragraph just for a little more context, and just like, yeah, I've just found this book. He wrote another one I'd like to get, but it's just such like a powerful analysis and how he developed, his kind of political thinking and consciousness while in prison. He was sentenced to like 1 year to life for stealing somebody's purse that had like $70 in it, and then like the guards like ended up murdering him, and before like they would get other prisoners to try to murder him, because he was so good at like organizing people and bringing up the political consciousness of other prisoners. And and it's like, no wonder that we haven't heard about people like George Jackson, or Huey Newton of the Black Panther
Yeah.
Party, and all these other kind of black revolutionaries, because like they are so they're such a threat to the state, and what they're saying like makes complete sense.
Yeah, I think it was either during like the beginning of it, and also I think as I was looking at his Wikipedia, there was this, like, when speaking of his idyllic transformation, he said, and I really love this quote too. I'm like, I met Marx, Lenin, Trotsky, Engels, and Mao when I entered prison, and they redeemed me. And that to me, it speaks so much to me too. Like, and it feels like it's so true. Like, even if these are all old writers, it is like a redemption in a way. It's this hope that people have been trying to do this for a while. So I think too, and it is, yeah, we talk about Buttigieg having like, grown up centrists when we have like, people who are being radicalized in prisons because they have, they're put through the system. And you're right, like, learning more about him and the Black Gorilla family, like, no, it's really, really cool. And yeah, like, again, it's kind of like winners or like oppressors write history. So of course, like the only black male figure from the civil rights that we're allowed to have is MLK, and even then, it's only like
Sanitized version
a
of.
version of MLK.
Yeah.
Yeah, like a sanitized version of MLK.
Yeah, because he was also a socialist, or at least like a social democrat. He talked about the ills of militarism, capitalism, and how the United States was approaching spiritual death because we spent more on war and killing people and bombs than we did on programs of spiritual uplift. And like that was definitely true then. It's even more true now, which is really, I don't know, just a disgusting kind of indictment on on the United States. But so this was the paragraph I got that quote from. It said, Lenin, Guevara, and Fanon, all in their particular fashion, postulate that before revolution can take place, all other forms of redress must be exhausted, clearly exhausted. Electoral processes must have broken down, the confidence of electorate in any of the old forms completely shattered. Confidence in the ability of the old system to honestly organize any aspect of public life must be shaken to the core. Years and years ago, it may have been an acceptable tactic to organize a people's ticket of solid worker and revolutionary credentials and arm it with an ideal platform, only to be defeated by a mudslinging opportunist warlord, demonstrably inferior scum swilling pig. Um, I mean, yeah, I think the point, like, I don't see how. I mean, I think probably a good majority of the people in the US, I would think, don't have any trust at this point in the electoral process.
Yeah,
And I mean, like you're saying about Bernie, like he's not like a radical. He's like he's a centrist, like frankly, his
yeah,
politics. And like we saw how like you're saying, the establishment did everything they could to make sure
yeah,
he wasn't the nominee for the Democrats, even though all he was, you know, advocating for was these very, you know, centrist and moderate positions, and even that was a bridge too far for the Democratic establishment to handle. So it's like, and then this is all in the context of like being in the pandemic, and then Joe Biden was vomited up, you know, as the candidate. So it's like, I mean, as far as electoral stuff goes, it's like I think that's definitely been exhausted, clearly exhausted, to George Jackson's point. And um I don't know, but I also feel like at the time he was writing, this was written in the early 70s. You know, there was a lot of oppression and state violence, both, you know, within the prison system and outside of it, towards like the Black Panther Party and other, you know, kind of revolutionaries. And I just think about, you know, how much more power the state has in terms of like surveillance and spying on people, being able to like turn your phone on and your microphone on and spy on people. And you know, all these other things of how they can track you, and how um, kind of revolutionary activity in a way would have been much easier before like cell phones and the internet and this technology. But in a way, it could also maybe be helpful to spread the word about certain ways. I don't know. What do you think about that?
Oh, that I actually love this topic. Well, to start with Jackson, I think even in his quote, he's like, and all of this is like, even as the best guy fights within the system, he will always be taken down by mudslinging, and
Mhm.
it's so true. Like, even again, yeah, I don't consider Bernie to be too much of a radical, but even as he would label himself a democratic socialist, like people would still be like, no, no, he's like a sock dem. Like he wouldn't be able to choose his own label because it would seem too radical. Even some of his supporters, he's like, no, he's really a sock. I'm like, I don't even know, like there's definitely a lot of sense, but he can't even label himself as a socialist because it will be rejected by his own platform because they'll be like, no, you can't do that. But yeah, I think surveillance has always been kind of the scary thing. I think, surveillance has always kind of occurred, and especially I think it took off a lot with like union busting and stuff like that in the late 1800s. Um, you know, MLK was watched by the FBI. One of my favorite actors, her name is Jean Segar. She was part of like the French New Wave. Um, Unfortunately, it's really dark, but she actually ended up um taking her own life because she got so much harassment from the CIA and FBI for giving money to the Black Panther Party. And but yeah, so with like cell phones and stuff like that, and especially with all the stuff that's going on, I think that, dissent in a way can communication has allowed for the set to grow, but it can also be like more easily tracked.
Hmm.
So usually when like I encourage a lot of people, but I also like encourage people to sort of like look at the ways to protect themselves. Um because at any point or form, like yeah, you can be watched, you can be like targeted, you can be like your data can be used to know who you are, qualify who you are. Homeland Security will have like they like made lists about putting journalists on a list because they support certain people. But I think that yeah, even more now within the state control and surveillance, I think it's so hard. And I think this is kind of a broader discussion that has to happen as we plan moving forward to whatever we're going to do. It's like the safety and knowing that you're always being watched.
Hmm.
Um, and in the pandemic does make it harder too, because a lot of times, people who have been doing this for a long time, they meet in person because that is really the safest
Yep.
way, but you can't do it anymore. I mean, we have now a lot of like different messages. Like I think I told you about Signal,
Yeah.
and which has like and like end-to-end encryption, and WhatsApp does too. But then WhatsApp is also owned by Facebook, so it can always get a little bit hairy.
Yeah.
I mean, when the when the other act, the streaming act, I think we talked about last week too, was gonna happen, I was like, well, better get a VPN or Tor or something. I don't know. How do you feel about surveillance? Like, even us as social workers, we are also asked to surveil
Yep.
other people.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. Yeah, because I'm in the CTAP program, so I'll be going into child welfare, and that is very like surveillance and kind of big brother oriented, like getting involved in, these families' lives, sometimes like going unannounced to their homes and like
Yeah.
looking in their cabinets to see if they have food, to see if they have, running water, all of these things. And um yeah, definitely need to abolish like the child welfare system as well and come up with
Yeah.
something different. But one of the seminars we had this past quarter, the presenter was talking about how we have so much neglect, childhood or child neglect in the US because of the child poverty rate is so high in the United States. So it's like we could easily, get rid of a lot of this stuff that comes into the child welfare system if we simply didn't have so much poverty. And obviously that's like a choice. There don't need to be, tens or hundreds of millions of people maybe at this point that are living, in poverty, and then their children suffering as a result when the, billionaires during this pandemic have increased their wealth by $1 trillion. And it was like I saw this thing, this Census Bureau, 1 in 8 people in November didn't have enough food to eat, and families with kids, that was like 16%. So it's like we could get rid of so
Yeah.
much of this suffering and inequality if we had, yeah, this different system in place. But yeah, and then the surveillance aspect, definitely like we are planning any type of like revolutionary activity or anything that could be deemed, you know, illegal, definitely like do it in person. Maybe
Yeah.
leave your cell phone at home, turn it
Yeah.
off, leave it in your car. And
Yeah.
yeah, only maybe engage in that kind of discourse with somebody that you trust and know is not some type of like infiltrator
Yeah.
connected to the police or Department of Homeland Security or whatever.
Yeah, I actually, I know it's, I mean, in a way, like you'll never be able to be 100% safe. That's just a matter of fact. So, but at the same time, it is kind of really good to just take best precautions. But I was actually reading about this too, and even as I one time went to a protest, it's like a lot of people either say like, yeah, put your phone on airplane mode, or either, you know, or leave your phone at home if you can't. if you can, if you can't, kind of like figure out how you're going to protect everything. And especially with like biometrics or like, touch ID or face ID, maybe a cop doesn't have the right to force you to like put your face next to your phone, but are they really gonna care?
Yeah.
No, I mean, one time I told a cop, I was like, I'm not speaking at all to you. And, they're like, are you just doing this to get under my skin? I'm like, no, fuck you, but I'm glad it gets under your skin. I'm doing it because I know that right now, at least I have this right. And if anything else, I know it'll be used against me. So of course not. They'll bully you into doing these things even if you don't want to. So I think, yeah, that's definitely, I guess, kind of like always having a contingency plan is my idea of safety. Like if you're gonna take your phone, like, disable sort of any sort of like touch ID or like, face ID, um or like, if you can get if you can get a burner phone, if you can
There
get
you
like a
go.
prepaid phone, that also works. But as we are talking about this, how it's all going, it is these resources are hard to obtain.
Yep.
um and yeah, like, the entire thing about 1 in 8 people being hungry, especially in like with children. And again, McConnell's bill wants to be exclude dependents on there. So it's his bill is going to make it harder, for people with families, which is really funny because I thought Republicans were like the pro family,
Yeah.
you know, fucking party, but no. So as we see, like, 1 in 8 children, 1 in 8 people, like it's just unthinkable. And it is, we're choosing to do that because there is more than enough money. There's food that's thrown away. There is food that is made. There's, and people like, will even go and, I was watching this video too, like where like not only would they throw the food away, they would like basically put bleach in the food, almost like
Oh,
if
wow.
you were like a rat, to make sure to you wouldn't even be able to eat it. That's, it's so crazy to me. And neglect, yeah, neglect is the number one reason why people get taken out, why kiddos get taken away. Like my friend has worked in child welfare for a long time here and in Arizona, and it is like neglect is number one. But you're punishing these people for being poor.
Mhm.
And um so it's like, and then this just creates more and more poverty. Like most people who are homeless, who I work with, either their parents were homeless or they were in the system. And we're just doing this because we are choosing to. There's no reason why, people should be going hungry during this time. We have more than enough money. Our government has more than enough money. Your taxes have enough, more than enough money. Even when you get unemployment, you still get your taxes, taken out of unemployment.
Mhm.
So
Yeah, we have more than enough food. We have more than enough houses to give everybody a house. We have more than enough money to give everybody free education up through if you want a PhD or whatever. But it's, yeah, it's just the political will is not there because the political parties in the US are just bought and paid for by the same capitalist interests and do their bidding, and they're only slightly different on social issues. And definitely, yeah, it's like Republicans claim to be the party that cares about family and family values, but seems like that only extends until like the baby comes out of a
yeah,
woman's body, and then it's like,
yeah.
well, no, fuck you, we only cared about the being anti-abortion and not giving you choice about your reproductive health.
Yeah, it's like it's not a, how dare you call it a parasite when it's a fetus, but when it's born, it's like we don't want a parasite in our welfare system. You're like, okay, and yeah, and like you said, the Democrats are like the work claim to be the party for the working people, but it hasn't been that case in a long time, or if I don't know if it's ever been that case. And any other sort of like party that has tried to, throughout history, we also don't know a lot about or learn about like populist parties or parties that had success in the United States before. And I think again, maybe it's just as a way to keep this power in hand by like 1 in 8 people. That is so crazy to me.
Yeah.
Did you see this picture where someone was like, UN, is the right to food a human right? And every country but every
Exactly.
country said yes, but America in big red was like, no, it's not a human right. um, and so, I mean, I think the United States, there's nothing in the UN that they can't do or haven't broken or don't care to. Like,
Mhm.
as
Yep.
like with George Jackson, like we're like as I was thinking, like how, he was so long in prison, right, from like 1 year to life, and I was just like, that's such a weird indefinite.
For stealing a purse.
Yeah, for stealing a purse. And so indefinite time is I consider a form of torture, but it still happens. People are held indefinitely at the border. Even in Washington, I was reading. Do you know about McNeil Island?
I've heard of it,
I
but
only
not
know a
super
little
familiar.
bit. I don't know a lot. I'm actually going to try to research more about it. But so McNeil Island is like a special commitment center, and it's for people who have committed some sort of like um, you know crime, regarding like sexual abuse and stuff like that. But people do the sentence, and then if the government or a judge says that they find it to be the case, then they can, after doing their entire sentence, they can be held indefinitely at this like special commitment center, which is like McNeil Island. So
Mhm.
literally we have all these people being shipped off to this island prison up the coast of like Seattle and stuff like that, and that's being held indefinitely. And these people in immigration centers are being held indefinitely, which again would be against the law. But
Yeah, and then the same thing with like solitary confinement.
yeah,
Confinement. George Jackson, a lot of the time that he was in prison was spent in solitary confinement because of his, revolutionary ideas and him wanting to organize other prisoners and help kind of educate and further their political consciousness. And obviously we can't have that. And then how that's a gross violation of human rights as well. But that's used so much in the US. And there's been people that have literally been like in solitary confinement for years, if not like decades. And I
yeah,
forgot who said it, but you can kind of judge the character of its society by how it treats its most vulnerable, like people who are locked up in prison, how we treat them literally as like less than human. I think it speaks volumes about how completely rotten the United States is as a country, frankly.
yeah, I think I was reading that too, or reading about, or someone in the preface was talking to, yeah, like solitary confinement or being forced to into this place where there's not even a toilet. So this, George Jackson, and I'm sure so many others and others to come had been and will be waiting in their own waste as a sort of punishment. We
Yeah.
have solitary confinement for people who are in juvenile correction centers. We are putting children in solitary confinement, and my friend linked me to this recently that being by yourself or solitary confinement or isolation, it will change certain neuropeptides in your brain, which would make you more aggressive, which at the same time, like scientifically from a technocratic point of view, solitary confinement is a thing that is just not good, even from like economic standpoint. But we don't care. We don't care, these people. And I think that's another reason too that really moved me, was when he's like, sometimes I would be waked up and talk, I feel like I was reading the book out loud or to the writers.
Mhm.
And it's heartbreaking though, because like who else is he going to be writing to or speaking to? The prison system, it's really awful. And I think I'm gladly, especially in Seattle, met a lot of people who are really into either reformation or evolution, because it's really bad. And it also reminds me that I should probably pull some books for book to prisoners. Have
Mhm.
you ever left some books for prisoners?
No, I definitely would like to get into that though, or maybe
Yeah,
become like a pen
I'll text
pal with
you
somebody or
some stuff.
something. Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Oh, okay. I totally know. I like, well, if you want to know, some of my friend um who I love with all my heart, because they're the most anarchist punk person ever. Love you, Danny. They introduced me to this organization that is called the Black and Pink Project. So it specifically helps people who are in prison and are LGBTQ or
Okay.
are HIV positive, because there's like a lot of things that they are especially very susceptible in like the prison system, and they do have like a pen pal program and all that stuff. But yeah, books to prisoners, like I'll have to look more into that. But what I would do is like there's this really cool bookstore in Pike Place Market, out of all
Oh,
places. It's called Left Bank Collective.
Left Bank Collective. Okay.
Yeah,
Writing
they're
that down.
they're super rad. It is kind of actually a collective, I think. But they do the books to prisoners, but they're not the only people you can talk to. There's all others. But it's great. And then also books to prisoners. So as you do try to give books, you do look at all the things that they ban you from sending to people.
Huh.
And that again, it's still they control everything that goes in, they control everything that goes out. And so it's I don't know, like, and also like, yeah, we're still like what, one of the few countries who's like death penalty, and you're like, okay. It's like death penalty is still at this time. I'm like, oh, okay.
Yeah, which is funny because a lot of more like conservative or Republican type politicians, or maybe people in general, like more likely to support that. But I thought they were all like about the sanctity of life and right to life and all that stuff. But again, that stops once somebody actually, you know, is not inside a woman's body
Yeah.
anymore. And yeah, I was just thinking about how you were talking about, the how devastating it is for a person's like mental and also physical well-being being in solitary confinement. And I just think about like just being in, living, and during this pandemic time and how people like in prison, we aren't even really, at least in the corporate media, you never hear about how that's impacting the people there and how are you going to physically distance while you're in prison? Like that's not a thing, and it's just like a huge breeding ground to spread, the pandemic and COVID-19 through that, and how people in prison are basically just we don't really think about them once they're locked up, and it's just a
Yeah.
form of like social control. It's yeah, and it's like very selective what people get locked up for. And if you're a white collar criminal, you're just going to get a slap on the wrist and pay a fine. But if you're
Or
you know
get pardoned by Trump if
yeah.
you oh my god, if you murder, oh god, I still can't get over the whole, what is it, Blackwater
Yep.
incident.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, you can get pardoned for that, but it's like,
Yeah, you can murder 17 Iraqis, including a 9-year-old child, and that's fine. But yeah, we can't pardon like Mumia Abu Jamal or Leonard Peltier or any of these other number of political prisoners, or Julian Assange or Edward Snowden, or we'll pardon people who committed the crimes for the U.S. empire, but we can't pardon the people who are against it and expose them. That wouldn't be right,
no, no, it would not be right. I don't know. If Trump really wants to be an agent of chaos, speaking to you, Trump, right now, yeah, I'd be like, pardon all these people, leak the books, just leak everything. But yeah, you have all these people, exactly, and when people are like, well, this is the law, or one, the law serves as a way to punish us and to control us, and especially though when our legal system is based mostly on not even proof of being convicted, you just have to argue enough to convince them for proof. Law is just written language and is open to interpretation only to these certain people, to
Yep.
judges, to thing, yeah, like an indefinite amount of time for like robbing a like someone for $70. I don't know. Mitch McConnell is robbing us more right now. Can he be put into indefinite confinement? It's ridiculous, and I think too. I think I really like a lot of, again, this like black activists, which at least it's not in the mainstream media, and through other ways we're able to find them, is the fact that they know what's going on, that they are marked as violent, and they're for like this morally thing. But while the state has its own violence, but they're like, with law and morality, this violence is okay, it's morally right, but this violence is morally wrong. Even when we look at real life and we're like, no, oh my god, no. So yeah, it is just, like you said, another way of social control,
Yep.
either through the media or through these legal systems or through all of them.
Education system, and yeah, how the it's always okay for the state to enact violence, whether that's through the police to kind of control these more or less like internal colonies that we have within the United States, or violence through our military industrial complex and through imperialism, overseas. That's fine and justified. But when people try to stand up to that state violence, no, we that's too far. You can't do that. That's not justified. The state, has that monopoly on violence, and they're the only ones who get to kill and murder
Yeah.
because they say so.
Yeah, no, we are literally a country filled with extrajudicial killings, which is an excuse this country uses to invade other countries. But yeah, we're like, people are like, well, maybe they just, I'm like, when did police become the judge and the executioner and everything that they wanted to? But again, it depends who you are. Like, like they will violently assault you for being at a park because you're homeless. Well, the guy who, the terrorist who blew himself up, Anthony Warner, on Christmas Eve or Christmas Day, I don't know.
Yeah,
And they're not calling him a terrorist, even though they're like, oh no, he didn't
because
mean
he's
to. They're like,
white.
yeah, yeah. I'm like, no, 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 you don't understand. They're like, well, there's no ideology. I'm like, he literally blew himself up on Christmas Day. Do you not think all the people who lived in that area were not terrorized and stuff like that? That is the point of terrorism, And there's more information coming now that apparently the police had been warned a year ago that by this guy's girlfriend, that he had explosives, and they were like, the national police were like, we're good, we're good, nothing to see here. We gotta go, like, 8 of us show up at a park or something.
Yeah, that's pretty interesting. And I guess I was reading a story about him. He was like driving around in the RV before with some type of like evacuation message playing over like a loudspeaker or something. Because I don't think anybody died. But yeah, it'd be interesting. Like, it doesn't seem like he left any type of like manifesto or letter like
Yeah.
explaining what he did. But I did see a thing. Um, on Twitter, there was some speculation that that AT&T building that he parked the RV outside of was actually like a front for the NSA. I don't know if this Anthony person was like aware of that, or that's why he parked the RV there, but it sounds like that AT&T building might be connected to the NSA, and maybe that's why he parked it there. We might not ever know that, but it would be really interesting, I think, to kind of find that out, because I'm obviously no fan of the NSA, if that's the case.
No, not a fan. Definitely not a big fan. Yeah, and because there's all these conspiracies that go with like, which are all mixed together, and people are like all, um, people is like conspiracies are bad. I'm like, no, conspiracies are a thing in which also happens because you've been gaslit so much by the government. So people are tying it to 5G, which I don't know, but like if like the NSA thing too, that's also possible because
Yeah.
there is all these towers, there's all these things. I mean, it was I will say specifically, it is a very interesting fact that this particular tower itself was able to take down the communication systems in Tennessee and like Alabama, and I can't remember from another state. I'm
Mhm.
not sure how that works, but it is kind of interesting that this particular tower managed to do that.
Mhm.
So that is kind of like, I'm like, I that is kind of interesting. That tower must have been very interconnected.
Mhm.
Huh? Huh? Must have been very good, interconnected. That's a suspicious tower, because it's true. But then you have people like the Vienna attacks recently. Before they 5 seconds within the attacks, they were like already like as Muslim terrorist attack, Muslim terrorist attack. They will say this within like
Mhm.
the bodies are not even done bleeding,
Yeah.
and but I mean, it's just, yeah. And again, we might never know because the corporate media will just muddle everything with all these things. Like if it turns out to be like maybe a thing about NSA, maybe they'll just write it off as 5G or whatever. And again, it's just more social control because they are watching. The NSA is always watching. The NSA, your cell phone has given permission. AT&T, to mobile, all these networks have given
Mhm.
permission for the NSA to tap this thing. Yeah, I have actually a lot of self-defense surveillance stuff if you want me to message you to it. But
Yeah.
like Electric Frontier Foundation, they're really good for that, because there's other things too about sort of like, so like maybe they need a warrant. I wish I remember. I mean, I'm gonna have to rewatch The Wire. Have you ever watched The Wire?
Oh, on HBO?
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's a good series. I've watched that a couple times too. Yeah.
I love I have a love-hate relationship with The Wire, but anyway. So to tap into like, your phone calls and stuff like that, or look at your messages, they might need a warrant for, but the metadata, such as like who are you calling, when are you calling, and stuff like that.
They just mass collect that, I think,
Yeah,
right?
it is mass
Yeah.
collected, and they can again put that together. I mean, they how did they find that this guy's RV was this RV? Through Google Maps, through Google Images. You know, that's another thing too. Why putting your phone on airplane mode is it's good if you go to protests, because cops can catch on to the signal and stuff like
Mhm.
that. Um, or like what is that? The Stingray
Yep, Stingray
Stingray.
technology, yeah.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah. So, I wouldn't put it too out there if that tower did end up being a front from like an NSA. Like we lived in also in a very particularly high tech city or area, and that too also makes me think about it too. You know, data is not in a vacuum, and neither is technology. And when you live in this society, it's not going to be as harmless as people make you try to believe it is.
Mhm. Yeah, it's definitely can be like used for a tool for good or a tool for evil. And yeah, like we were talking about earlier, just if you're, engaging in these, activities, definitely, yeah, find ways to protect yourself and your comrades, because yeah, the state and Big Brother will always be kind of looking over your your
Yeah.
shoulder.
Yeah, and also you don't always need to like read the super dry thing. Actually, um, a shameless plug, but I also can edit this
Mhm.
out. I just finished a scene, but I'm gonna put up later. But also can give you the PDF, which is just like safety tips for anarchists and feminist babes. And as I was looking at different places on Etsy, there's a lot of people who also do these scenes, or you can find online, which is like sort of like a fun way to like look at the literature and look how to like defend yourself, but and adding cool things to it. So to me, like there's a thing about protecting yourself but also making this information available to other people,
Mhm.
and in a way you do want to show the FBI that there is dissent, and we will not be repressed by it, because you want other people in the United States to realize the United States has had a long history of dissent. It just has been stamped out and silenced and made sure that you don't know about it.
Mhm.
Even now, the Trump executive order, we don't talk a lot about the his like anti what is it, 1677, his anti-1677 project. He named it something else. I think he might have named it like 7078 executive order, which he's like, you can't have any sort of like anti racial or critical theory or race theory. And
Yeah.
I come from a state where that happened in Arizona, like mm, a few years ago. They literally ban any sort of like Chicano literature because they're like all these Latinos in Arizona are just gonna rise up after reading all this Chicano literature. So they ban they ban any sort of like non-white literature, and again, social control. And I'm really afraid that we're not even thinking about how, or like a lot of the media people are not thinking about what this means, and how much that again is just an idea to make sure you don't know what's going on and what's happening, and to keep up this propaganda of capitalism and exceptionalism and stuff like that. Even white supremacy is a way to make sure like poor whites and don't get along with other like non-whites or whatever. Even the concept of whiteness was created for that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was listening to this. Yeah, one guy kind of talked about, yeah, US kind of colonialism and how it actually started within the United States and westward expansion and stealing half of Mexico's land, what is now California, Arizona, and New Mexico, and I think Florida as well. And
Yeah.
then like the how also white supremacy was used by these other colonial powers, like the Spanish and the
Yeah.
Portuguese and kind of Latin and South America. And that's why, a lot of those countries speak Spanish now, is because that's the colonizers' language that they brought over there. And how white supremacy and the concept of whiteness, like you were talking about, was used to justify this, like, oh, those people are kind of lesser than us, we're going to go help reform and civilize them, when it was actually just to take their resources and control their people. And the same thing happened in the United States, but even some ways more egregiously, because of slavery and almost the complete genocide of the indigenous peoples here. And yeah, and how even you can be a person of color but still uphold white supremacy, which is what Obama did to a large
Yeah.
extent as president, especially with his foreign policy.
Yeah. And there's like even I was there's this particular YouTuber. His name's Hakim, and he says he's part of the the whole entire left to bread too. But he's my favorite because he's so angry all the time. He's not really even angry, but compared to everyone else, he would be called angry. But he's from Iraq, and I really enjoy a lot of his stuff because it has this anti-imperialist view that even a lot of times I don't get from other leftist groups, and it is really alienating. It's very, very alienating actually. And you'll have someone be like, "Oh, it's okay," or like, or people telling me be like, "Oh, Biden and Bernie or like Biden and Trump are completely different, and if you don't vote for Biden, then you are, you're putting all these people in danger." I'm like,
Yeah.
it's really similar for me because of how it affects the other world. By the way, it is also similar to you. Like Biden's immigration policy is shit, and a lot of the things that happen is because of the war machine. So many people wouldn't be coming here if they weren't displaced. So many people wouldn't be coming here if we wouldn't spend all this time extracting their resources and
Yep.
forcing all these things upon them.
And propping up their
Yeah,
repressive right-wing governments,
yeah,
things like NAFTA and all that crap too.
yeah. Another time I agree with Trump. He's like, NAFTA was the worst deal ever. I was like, yeah, yeah, and it still continues though. Like since NAFTA, Juarez has had the worst like femicide in all of the world. Like Ciudad Juarez, it's the most dangerous place for women, and a lot of it was because NAFTA. came along and brought all these things, sort of like maquiladoras or textile, you know, things. And then, like in Mexico, it's like the number one place that is the most dangerous place if you're a journalist. And we don't talk about how this all connects, and a lot of it is, it's just propagating colonialism again and again and again and again and again. The disproportionate violence against indigenous women. I feel there's also a connection to, one, the violence takeaway of land, and the continuous taking away of the land to build like oil pipelines,
Hmm.
which also then brings a bunch of like gold rush or oil rush workers,
Yep.
and who create more violence against these women. And as you see again, it's just taking the land, bringing violence, taking the land, bringing violence. Oh my God, indigenous people, why aren't they doing well? Why aren't they doing well?
Yeah, it's like a it's such a big mystery to some people. It's like, really, like, how would you feel if you were completely dispossessed of your land, there was a genocide against your people, your kids were taken away to boarding schools, you were shoved on these reservations, usually on really, crappy areas, like you said, and then the resources in those areas, when, the government or these, financial interests find, mineral wealth there, whatever form, they come in, they break the treaties that they already signed, and then, yeah, it's like, no wonder. Of course, like, those are hugely, hugely traumatic events, and it like continues to happen. And
Yeah.
yeah, like you're saying, it's all kind of tied together, and like all of these oppressive systems need to be broken down. And one of the things that George Jackson mentions was how Mao talks about, anytime a revolution fails, it's not the fault of the people, but actually the fault of the vanguard party. And I found that really interesting. So I was like kind of curious, like, I feel like we don't really have like any type of vanguard party that's ready to kind of lead the
We are
revolution
working on
in the United States. Like, it's not going to be like DSA or anything, like that. So it's like, what can we build that would help, further this kind of revolutionary goal that, we support, and that, needs to happen. Like, what would that look like, you think? Or I don't know.
I wonder that too, because so there's like, um because I really, yeah, the George Jackson thing too is so good because he brings up all these like different writers as
Yep.
well. And all the time these people are accused of being like, being like, oh, they're not wanting to get along well with us. I'm like, no, they just don't want to uphold white supremacy. Like
Yes.
he's quoting, Mao and Trotsky and Lenin and Che. But so the Vanguard Party thing, um, it is, so it is kind of like, so when a revolution fails, um, and the Vanguard Party, so a Vanguard Party to me would look like sort of like the people who are prepared to help others. Um, it, but within the United States, that seems to be like it's so large. I wonder if it would be like a localized Vanguard parties and stuff like that. Because I've known like there's a lot of like there's the DSA and there's all this stuff, and there's a lot of political parties, especially Trotskyite political parties who do talk a lot about the vanguard and what it would mean, as the vanguard, what is your role, or as how does it organize it, and stuff like that. As the vanguard, like what do you do? Do you raise the class consciousness? So I think for me, as a vanguard party, or the building of a vanguard party, or the interrelation actions of people trying to build this, should be to bring up more of the class consciousness, to sort of like um talk more about it. I think for me this is like why a lot of the media is important, why like these zines are important, because it's sort of like that is what can bring people to realize, because it's sort of once you realize things, everything makes sense, and it can almost never be taken away because you realize that everything has been this way. like raise class consciousness so we all can do a general strike.
Yeah, it's not gonna happen through the corporate media, that's for sure. So yeah, definitely think that's a really good point you made about just getting, these ideas, these messages out there to a broader population. And I also think it makes a lot of sense what you're saying about doing it on a localized level, because we are such a big and diverse like country. Kind of maybe the idea of like think globally but act,
Yeah,
locally, try to, yeah, expand, the class consciousness of, people and comrades that you're in contact with. And um the whole thing with the Black Panther Party, um it's mentioned in this book how Huey Newton talked about how, the Black Panther Party instituted their survival programs. It was like survival pending revolution, like people's material needs still need to be taken care of, whether that's housing, food, education, or, whatever else, while still kind of keeping that bigger goal in mind that we need to completely transform this system, or we're just kind of putting, band-aids on it more or less.
yeah. I mean, people get really offended or look at me weird. Where it's like, as a social worker, I'm like, abolish social work, and people are like, what the fuck? Like the police. I'm like, I guess in a way it's just because I think social workers are incredibly important, especially as things aren't changing right now, but we are sort of like these band-aids.
Yep.
But the Black Panther Party is true though. It's right because as we aim for the broader goal of revolution, we still have to think about the material conditions of people. Such as and I think I remember one of the professors did tell us that the Black Panther Party was like probably the first group to organize free childcare for people.
Free,
Uh,
they got
yeah,
the free breakfast program, which started in schools. That started with the Black Panthers. They don't usually get credit for that, but that came from them.
yeah. Well, otherwise, no, because how would you keep the illusion that Black Panthers are a scary militant group?
Yeah.
How else? Oh my gosh, breakfast. How? Whoa. Trying to poison everyone with their breakfast. And I wonder from this perspective, from this point of view, if maybe the Black Panther Party was seen as a way of their own vanguard party, as them sort of like I like to think of it because there's different people who like think Vanguard Party like leads or Vanguard Party supports, and I feel like I'm more of like a Vanguard Party supports. Basically, it's the people who are planning once everyone else is ready to go on into revolution. But I don't know. How do you interpret Vanguard Party? What about you? What does the Vanguard Party look like to you?
Yeah, I mean, I think George Jackson talks about in this book, like the vanguard isn't like leading from the rear. It's not like the rear guard. They're in front of the kind of movement in some capacity. And, he also talks about how a revolutionary, um, let's see, what the task of a revolutionary is to make a revolution. And he also talks about how there's never been any spontaneous revolutions, and it's kind of the job of um, the revolutionary to help, organize people, raise their class consciousness, interact with people to see actually what their needs are and organize around that. You obviously don't want to be trying to force something that isn't actually going to improve the material conditions of the people, because then why would people be, attracted to that type of movement? um yeah, so I think it's more of like getting people, um teaching them how to think, and
Yeah,
like the status quo wants to teach people what
yeah,
to think. So I
yeah,
think, yeah, it again just really connects back to class consciousness and, helping meet the material conditions of people, while still trying to organize in whatever way makes sense in that particular context for this kind of broader goal of completely overturning all of these, rotten to the core systems.
yeah. No, I definitely agree. It's trying to, and I mean, it's sometimes it feels everyone's running around with their head cut off, but and naturally, I think humans are
Yeah.
also good um, at sort of mutual aid and stuff like that. Because as we talk about people going hungry, instead of all of paying your taxes, we should all just do a mutual aid kind of thing, because, like in places like here or Portland or Minneapolis, there's like community fridges where people put like fridges together that not only has like that kind of food, but has like um hot food and stuff like that. It's not just giving a bunch of homeless people like, here's peach can from 1992. Enjoy. So I think there's a way where we can bring both this like a spontaneous collaboration of mutualism, but also planning together, because you know spontaneously it doesn't happen, and it's not necessarily the people's fault. It might just be the state will make sure that it spontaneously it never happens, or repress it so strongly. So sometimes, yeah, planning. Because, but once you realize that you have all the numbers and all the people and everyone's on the same page, just getting everyone on the same page is kind of like the goal, because then you have the numbers. And when the workers realize that they don't need the employee, or the tenants realize that they don't need the landlord and they need us, then they're fucked. So that's why they don't want us to think that, because they need us more than we need them. So they want to prevent people from getting the class consciousness and working together.
Yeah, that's like, yeah, why the, Red Scare really went after like unions and communists and socialists, because that's what people like them and us are all about is, finding out ways to improve the material conditions of people. So actually everyone has a good quality of life, and it's not just the capitalist overlords that get to enjoy the benefits of our labor. It's actually the people doing the labor get to
Yeah.
benefit from that. I mean, yeah, it's pretty interesting. And yeah, a quote from George Jackson, it says, "A people can never be so repressed that they don't strike back in some way." And I just really makes me think of George Jackson himself, how he was, you know, locked up in prison for stealing a purse in solitary confinement a lot, and had all these attempts on his life before the guards there killed him. But look at the impact like he's had, like this amazing book that I feel like has definitely raised my
Yeah.
consciousness like further. And like even in that really horribly repressive condition, like how much he was able to generate that really um, went was very like freeing and liberating. So it's like if he can do that in that condition, like we can really create some positive change. I think it's just like we gotta keep at it and finding the ways that work. And I also thought something that was interesting, he talked about in this book how you should have like a political organization and also have like some separate like kind of security like military unit like that was styled around like guerrilla warfare and stuff, which I thought was really interesting. Like he just like takes it to like the next level with like the stuff that he was talking about, and like weapons and bombs and all kinds of
Yeah, and
crazy things.
it's amazing. Also, this is also good. Why communicating in person is good, but
Yeah.
oh, it's so true. Like when you think about it, most of the people who are incarcerated for felonies, again, people of color, Black people, also Indigenous people, tend to be um, as much of the rate as being murdered by the police as well, or been in prison. And the one thing that we learn is that when people are committed felons, they only have two choices. If they do get those choices, you can vote or you can lose your right to own a firearm. And for so long, I have been very sort of like second. I mean, it still is a lot of like mixed feelings, but I've definitely kind of gone from like the no guns to like maybe there's self-protection, but
Yeah.
again, like in the hands of a bunch of leftists, in the hands of a bunch of like, again, that was another way to demonize the Black Panther Party, because of their, right to self-defense. While, why the KKK, it's burning crosses and bombing churches,
Mhm.
and you know, and it still happens. Like Dylan Roof, like he killed his people in
Mhm.
South Carolina, and
Yeah, it's like the FBI has said like the white supremacists, those groups are responsible for like the most deaths and everything, but like there's not really a big focus. It seems like going after those groups. It's
Yeah.
Trump like going after Antifa, and
Uh,
saying there's good people on both sides at like, Charlottesville. And it's like, I don't know, if you're against Antifa, if you're against anti-fascism, you're for like fascism and
yeah.
white supremacy and like stuff that Hitler did and supported. So there's like no middle ground there.
Yeah, I'm like, no, like, there's people who kill and there's people who don't kill. You wouldn't
Yeah.
be like, well, the person who killed the other person was also kind of good. I mean, maybe if you're white, they might say that about you in the news, but it's true. There's like this entire two side thing, and again, we're like, it's sort of like as a way to be like, no, 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 we all gotta be force ourselves to be rational and think about both sides. I'm like, what do you mean think about both sides? Like, Antifa, what is that? You're so people who are not fascists are slightly bad. Is it because they're not fascist? Are they slightly fascist? What do you mean? But he has again and again said stuff like that. I mean, all the violence post elections too. It has a lot of his rhetoric. It's like, Proud Boys like stand by. He didn't denounce him. He just said stand by, and
Mhm.
that was not an accident.
Well, and then you see how the police and the security state respond to those white supremacist hate groups when they target, harass, assault, and kill people that are protesting against those things. Like they get treated with kid gloves, if that, because like the security state, like, and a lot of cops, I think, are completely in support of white supremacy and
Oh
groups
yeah,
like the
yeah.
the Proud Boys and stuff.
And they infiltrate. I mean, a lot of cops are white supremacists. A lot of people in the military are white
Yep.
supremacists. I think in Germany they found out one of the most intense recent attacks from a right-wing white supremacist group, and a lot of the weapons they got were from police, from the military,
Mhm.
and I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, I would be surprised if there if the majority of people who are, like there's a lot of jobs in their capitalism and in their society that I understand that survive, but I feel like at one point you're like, oh my gosh, I am the arm of this killing machine. I am like, I am this arm of like the state. Like, I'm like, why don't you just like quit right there and then? Like, it's
Yeah.
like just quit right there and then. I mean, there's a lot of people who do this work, and then it does bug them enough to be like, whoa, like, Edward Snowden, like, he went through all this work. Another person who's still in prison, who I think a lot about her, is Reality Winner. Do
Yep.
you know Reality Winner?
Yeah, I've heard of her. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, she's like, Julian Assange, like, I think his trial is going on, but we haven't heard about anything about it. And I think his father was talking about his prison cell too. That, like, they gave him a tiny prison cell. Like, Julian Assange looks incredibly sickly because of the way he's been treated, and he's has been in confinement in jails, in embassies, and things like he has a target on his back as enemy of the state, and this is what this entire you know basically only talked about once trial is going on. Like, he could have been taken out to like some sort of weird detention camp for all we know right now that we don't know.
Yeah, he's been, yeah, like what's happened to him is really disgusting, and I doubt Biden would pardon him. I don't think. I mean, I hope Trump does. I doubt it. We've seen where his priorities lie with regards to the, pardoning with the, Blackwater war criminals and other people kind of within his, orbit, and how, yeah, even a lot of so-called like progressive media, like the, Young Turks, which have a huge platform, haven't talked about Julian Assange at all. And like, you're not, I mean, if you don't support, Julian Assange and like WikiLeaks and him being pardoned and getting his freedom back, like you're not progressive, like you're not a leftist. An attack on Julian Assange is an attack on freedom of the press, freedom of
Yeah.
speech. And it's like the thing, first they came for Assange, nobody spoke up for him, and then it goes down the line, and then they're going to be coming for you next.
Yeah. Anyone who like reveals the government and, as you said, like as the imperial war machine, they deserve not to be, killed for this. And even if there's a lot of weird things that I might not like about them, I like 100% they must be pardoned because, even as a whatever you are, you should at least care about government transparency. You should care and not be, you should know the state is not your friend, it's your enemy, and it will do everything it can to protect the secrets, and including dehumanizing people. Because that's that we're talking about him. I'm Googling him. And then I this was a funny headline, though I do hear a lot about RT, but whatever. But it was just like, the UK embassy's like, China can imprison, their one journalist for, how dare China imprison their one journalist for, breaking the COVID-19 news, which is really, it's pretty awful. But then in the West, hypocritically, in places like the UK, would be like, yeah, but we're just gonna, violate Julian Assange human rights for leaking. So, Bloomberg will be like, China, how, imprison this journalist for talking about COVID. I'm like, okay, true. Let's talk about that. What about you, Bloomberg? When are you gonna take a full page ad being like England, barbaric country, um, imprisons journalists who alerted the world of the virus of, the war machine.
Yeah, a lot of people like are very selective with their criticism. They'll, lobby those types of claims towards, you know, governments that aren't in line with, yeah, US imperialism or the US's worldview, but they're very silent on US allies that engage in just as egregious, if not more, behavior, or stay completely silent on the crimes of the US empire, which are, you know, there's too many to name, frankly.
There is, and again, it's just like we can we can hold one in contempt and we can think about our own, but especially in corporate media, it's like, oh, like we'll talk about this when it benefits us, but not when it doesn't benefit you. And
Yeah.
again, when the police have assaulted journalists in America, when people have lost eyes in America while covering the police protest, well, at the beginning of May, one young woman died as a result of being tear gassed so much because she had respiratory problems, and especially during a pandemic. Like, I think that it's in and of itself a crime against humanity, but I don't think the International Tribunal Court has any um, sort of like
Yeah.
power here. The United States kind of does what they want to do. Again, I think the WHO has been really helpful to me this year, even as Trump and the CDC um, try to underplay this and stuff like that. And I think it bows again to like the support for international solidarity. Again, I think this lack of anti-imperialism sometimes stops us from having this solidarity internationally with other people. It's international permanent revolution. So
Yeah.
I am here for the people who are down to take the imperial state at any time. But yeah, in general, freedom of the press, you should always, always, always critique that. You should always. I mean, that's the scary thing about Section 230. It's like, um, where's our freedom gonna go? Like, are we gonna be in prison, or how is that gonna affect our free speech and the internet speech? Like, our digital rights are not to be for sale, and definitely not for only $2,000 or $600 or whatever.
Yeah.
Like, I
Can't
think
really
it's
put a
much
price on
more
it.
than
Yeah.
uh,
Awesome. Well, um, I don't know that. Yeah, this has been a really good chat as usual. Maybe we should end it on, I don't know, something more light and um, positive. How about a couple of things that we're both thankful for? How about that?
Okay. So, yeah, there's that too, like 2020, what you felt accomplished or what. So I am thankful for like, I think all the people and generally everyone. I'm thankful for the view. That sounds so corny, but I'm thankful for like all of the support and communal aid and things that have come together, even as COVID might have made things more unequal, it also brought us closer. I That has made me feel very thankful. I'm thankful for the break, and I'm also thankful for the knowledge. Like I said, I didn't really know anything about, or who he was until you told me you were reading George Jackson's book, and now I know so much about him, and just his quotes have also brought me so much more like happiness too. So I'm thankful for that.
Awesome. Yeah, definitely thankful from the break from school. It's been nice. It's went by very quick. And I think we're also about halfway done with the program or thereabout. So I'm also excited for that. And yeah, thankful to have my material conditions are what are in good shape. And I know can't be said for a lot of people. So just recognizing um my privilege and yeah, thankful, yeah, to have so many, yeah, good things in my life and just wanting to work to create a world where has a good quality of life. So yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I think I'm thankful too for that, and I am really thankful. I think more people have had some sort of class consciousness or class awakening. I mean, that sounds so patronizing, but whatever. I'm really, really grateful about the level of political activity and heart people have shown. It's incredible. I'm very grateful for everyone's heart.
Mhm.
It's amazing. I'm
Yeah,
really happy. I'm gonna have to do more reading of George Jackson, but yeah, you should also look into his brother. But I'm like, I want to
yeah.
tell him I'm like, I don't want to spoil. I'm like, I don't know if this is spoiling someone's life, but his brother apparently was
Jonathan
like,
Jackson.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
he was friends with Angela Davis. Apparently, Angela Davis was his mentor.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, yeah.
Interesting.
Um, and there was also a beautiful relationship between those two. So between the Jackson brothers. All
Mhm. Yeah, I
right.
definitely have to check into that.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Let's
Yeah,
Happy
thank
New
you.
Year. This
Yeah,
was
Happy New
great.
Year.
I'll talk
Have
to
a
you
good
later.
rest of your day.
Bye.
Bye.